All right, everybody, we are live, and we're going to be doing a little bit more with some of these Ethernet adapters. Just give me a second here. I'm waiting for my Amazon thing here to catch up, and we'll get going. So yeah, I got in a couple more of these. Let me go live here on Amazon. 3, 2, and 1. Here we go. All right. So I got in a couple of these Sabrent USB to Ethernet adapters the other day, and I know there's been a lot of viewer interest in higher speed Ethernet. So a couple of weeks ago we looked at a pluggable 2.5 gig, and now I've got in this one from Sabrent that does 5 gig over USB, and we're going to test this a little bit later in the video here. Of interest is that this is $60. So, you know, for a high speed Ethernet device, it is not all that expensive, so that's good to see. And then here is a 2.5 gig, and we're gonna test this one first, and I have a feeling it will probably perform as well as the other ones do. And what I wanted to do real quick is just kind of jump through our testing procedure here so you understand what we're doing. So what we're going to be doing here is sending data across my office to the other side of the room. And I've got a 10 gig switch here. So I have a Mac Mini on the other side of this cable, and that one is connected at 10 gigs on this Netgear ProSafe X505 switch. This is an unmanaged switch. Right now it's a little bit pricey for this switch. It's like $350 for the 10 gig switch for only 4 ports essentially. You have a 5th SF port here for dropping in those fancier connectors there. But it's useful because we can get, 10 gigs max. And what's nice about this is that it also will do 5, 2.5, 1, and 100. So it can run the whole gamut of like the last 2 decades of Ethernet, right? So we have a full view of things. And by the way, on the way down here, it hasn't fully broken, but I put a little crack in my mug, and I'm so bummed out. I got to figure out how to patch this up, because it's like leaking coffee through the through it here. So tasty. So let me take some questions before we get started here, because I'm getting some in on YouTube here. Zam is asking, do you need a 10 gig switch to do 2.5 gigs? And the answer to that question is no. In fact, I think there are now more switches coming out at faster data rates. And I think QNAP has one that does 2.5 on its own. So you don't need a 10 gig, but when I was out shopping, this was it. So this was about a year ago that I got this. Now, what we'll be doing on our control machine, at least initially, just to test the connection, is I've got this Thunderbolt 10 gig adapter. So here's the deal with USB. So USB at the max can do 10 gigabits per second, and this is a 10 gig Ethernet adapter, but we need Thunderbolt to get the full speed out of it. So that's why we're doing that. And I'm just going to plug it into my MacBook Pro here, which you can't really see on my overhead view, but I can give you an idea. Here's the cable, and we're just going to plug it into the Mac here and get this on the network. Now, when I plug this in, again, we're looking at a 10 gig adapter to start with, just to make sure the network is functional and functioning properly. When this connects, you'll see now that we've got 2 green lights next to that cable, which on this switch indicates that we have 10 gig. So that's what we've got there. So now, if I pull up my little Wi-Fi perf bandwidth tester here, and we run the test, we're going to push some data through the cable, and you can see them blinking here because they're talking to each other. And we'll get an idea as to our transfer rate here. And sometimes it takes it a little bit to get up to speed. So we may run this again, but you can see the data rate here kind of increasing now. And this is about where I see 10 gig performing. So we're getting about 8,500 megabits per second, give or take. And I might try to run the test in the other direction, because that Mac Mini sometimes can be a little temperamental on its Ethernet. So let's let that run a little bit. Let me reverse the test here. Go client to server. We might see better speeds. I got to do some adjustments on that Mac Mini. Yeah, so this is what I'm looking for. And what happened there was I was pulling data from the Mac Mini to this machine, and for some reason, like that process results in a lower speed. The other issue that could be happening right now is that the Mac just put itself to sleep. So let me run over there real quick and wake it back up. And that might be impacting things a little bit. And I also need to make sure Jake stays out of it. Sometimes Jake logs into this thing here and does stuff. So let me just turn off the screensaver. And the other thing that happens is that the Mac does stuff in the background that you can't really control sometimes either. So there's that as well. All right, so let's try this again. Like I said, I just want to get a baseline to know what we should be seeing here. So we should be getting, yeah, so you see how we're doing about 9.4 gigabits per second there? That's what we're getting on a 10 gig to 10 gig connection, again, using one of these larger adapters here. Carol, thank you very much for your Super Chat contribution. Very nice of you. So yes, I just wanted to set that baseline so that you all can see what we should be, what our expectation should be, which again is about 9.4 megabits per second, 9,400 megabits per second on a 10 gig to 10 gig connection. So we know that we have the bandwidth here. And so now what we want to do is start opening up these adapters and then see what we get. So we should see on this one close to 2,500, not the full 2,500, but close to it. And this one should be close to 5,000. And then, of course, on the one we have here, we're getting close to 10,000 because that's a 10 gig adapter. So that's how that works. All right. And Patrick Chang makes a good point about Thunderbolt 3 and its future, given that Apple is dumping Intel. Yeah, and I've suggested to people, I've had a few people write in saying it's irresponsible of me to suggest this, but I have suggested to people to hold off on buying Macs at all right now, because I was about to upgrade to a 16-inch MacBook Pro, and I've decided against it because they're changing over their entire system, right? So I'm not really eager to jump in there just yet, because I want to get an ARM Mac. And Zam is correct, because USB 4 now includes Thunderbolt as part of the spec. So if it supports USB 4, there's a good chance it will. And I can't see Apple not doing that, but we don't know yet. We just don't know. All right, so we're going to start off with the 2.5 gig adapter first. And it's very nice. So it's all metal. I'll give you another view of it here. Nice and solid. It's like solid metal. Feels really good. And I wonder if these are like little NVMe adapters that they just have the Ethernet thing plugged into. I'm not sure. So very nice. And then we've got the adapter, and then we have, I hate these things, but we have one of the out-of-spec USB things here. Let me just open up this package. So here is our little out-of-spec USB connector. So we're going to have to put this on because the Mac that I have, of course, is running with just Thunderbolt 3 ports, which are USB-C ports. So my guess on this one, and we'll see when we plug it in, my guess on this is that it's just going to be a USB 3.1 Gen 1 device. So I'm not expecting this to be a fast one. The 5 gig one I'm going to be more curious about. So price point on the 2.5 gig is $35. And these are the kinds of things that you'll want to get if you've got a gigabit connection now, because these, I'm just going to unplug, stop the test. Okay, good. So I'm just going to unplug the Ethernet cable from this one, because we're going to keep the same cable so we know what works and what doesn't. So we're going to put the Thunderbolt one aside for now. And now we're going to connect up our 2.5 gig adapter and plug it into the Mac and see what we get. So I'm just going to get it plugged in here. Now when this connects up, what we should see on here is just the right-hand light under the 2 is lit up, which indicates that we have a 2.5 gig connection. And while that's getting started, let me jump into my control panel. And I want to just make sure that, yep, we're connected here. So let me show you what is on my Mac display for configuration. So you can see that it recognized this as a 2.5 gig LAN adapter. So that's good. The speed is configured automatically. So I think this 1000 base T is probably not accurate to our current connection, given that it negotiated a 2.5 gig. So let us see what we get when we run the test. So here we go. Remember, same test, same connection, and we're getting what I expect right out of the gate. Perfect. So that is good. And this is what you can expect over a regular USB 3 connection, because remember, USB 3 is 5 gigabits per second. This is basically using 2.5 gigs of that, so it's not out of the realm of possibility to get 2.5 gig speeds even out of an older USB 3 connector. So Zam was wondering if I could open one of these things up, and I think that's going to be hard. These things are like hermetically sealed. I cannot find an entry point on here, so I don't know how I would begin to do that short of breaking it. But given the size, and given the fact that Sabrent does a lot of these NVMe to USB adapters, I would expect that this one is probably, it's got to be some kind of NVMe thing. What I'm curious about, though, is the connection that it's getting. So I'm going to jump into the Apple system report here. Let me show you what I'm looking at. And I'm going to go over to USB and just see, yeah, so this is our Realtek chipset. And we see this on a lot of these 2.5 gig devices, so that's not out of the realm of expectation. And in fact, this is kind of like the same, this is probably the same chipset as the pluggable one that we looked at earlier. And that's one thing to keep in mind about electronics like this, is that a lot of these are built on essentially commodity parts. So what you buy from Sabrent might be similar to what you get from pluggable, but they have different packaging around them. And then you have to decide which companies you like the best and that sort of thing. But what's nice about this is that given it's a Realtek chipset, it's probably going to work on anything you plug it into. So if you plug it into a Windows machine, it'll work. You plug it into a Mac like I'm doing here, no problem. Plug it into Linux, no problem. It'll just work on whatever you plug it into. So all good. So yeah, I think this is a nice little adapter. Works as advertised. My only gripe is that we have these connectors, and so you've got to live with that. And these are kind of out of spec. Now this will only let you plug it in one way, so you're a little bit protected there, of course. But you got to be careful with these things. They're just not in spec. I don't think anything bad can happen, but you're not supposed to make a adapter like that. Okay. So next up, we're going to take a look at the 5 gig adapter, and we're going to see how the 5 gig performs and go from there. So let me pull it up on the product carousel. Now the difference in price is that the 2.5 gig is $35 and the 5 gig is $60. And Zam is asking, why go 2.5 if 5G is available? And I think what it comes down to, in my thought on this, is it comes down to the type of cabling that you're going to use. So right now I've got Cat 6 cables all in this thing here, except this one. This patch cable is Cat 6. My regret in wiring up my office is that I wired up Cat 5e to all of my Ethernet jacks here. For a gigabit, not a problem. But for anything beyond, when you go to 10 gigabit, you want the Cat 6 cable at a minimum, especially if you're going longer distances. So for example, my network closet is over to my left, and then the furthest device is the Mac Mini we're plugged into right now, which is why whenever I do these tests, I run a Cat 6 cable from here to there, because I notice that although the 10 gig works most of the time, eventually I'm seeing the Mac Mini negotiate its speed back down to gigabit, likely because there's some interference on the wire because of the fact that the Cat 6 cables are made to a different spec than the Cat 5 cables. Now you can get 10 gig to work over Cat 5, in my experience, but the longer you go, the less reliable those speeds will be. However, I think if you wanted to push 2.5 gig over Cat 5, you'd likely have a much better chance of that, especially if you have some good high-quality Cat5e cable. And the higher in speed you go, the less reliable things you're going to get. And if you're looking to do, gigabit internet connections with fiber or whatever, 2.5 is fine, because you're probably only getting one into your house. So, you've got enough there and can spare some extra for other stuff. Ryan Cage wants to know, is Cat7 out there? Yes, in fact, this is a Cat7 cable, I believe. Let me check on my list of my cables wire here. Incidentally, these network adapters, by the way, came in free of charge from the Amazon Vine program. And no one's approving this live stream before it goes up. I'm pretty sure this is a Cat7 cable, and I think you can tell because they have some additional shielding on the connector, as you can see. So you've got some shielding there. You might hear some kids making noise over there. All right, so let's take a look at the 5 gig adapter. And this one is actually better constructed. It's still metal, just like the other one. It's got one little extra heat sinking going on here, so it's a little bit larger. This has definitely got to be a NVMe enclosure. Now, what I like about this one is that we have the USB Type-C connector, and in the box, they have the cables done properly. So you get a USB-C cable and a USB-C to USB-A. So that's good. I like that. So I'm very pleased with that. So right out of the gate, even if I didn't need the full 5, I would probably get this one because it's got the cabling correct and I've got the 5 gig. So let's plug it in and let's see what happens here. So I'm going to do a USB-C connection first, but I'm going to also connect it with the regular USB-A cable. But I think before we start running the test, I'm actually curious to see what the Mac sees it as. Because remember, there are 2 different USB speeds. Well, actually, there's 3 different ones. You have a 5 gig USB connection, and then you have the faster Gen 2 10 gig connection, and then the slower USB 2.0 400 megabit connection. And what I want to know on this adapter is whether or not it is showing up as USB Gen 1 or Gen 2. All right, so now it is green light to the left of the number, which we're seeing here. If I can get a better position there for you. A green light to the left of the number indicates that we've negotiated a 5 gigabit connection. So it is properly negotiated. Our connection to the Mac Mini is still running at 10. And then this cable, which just interconnects the rest of my network, is running at 1 gigabit. So the connection inside the switch is 10 max. Out to the rest of my network, only 1 gig right now. And let me just see what folks are saying here. Zam says Cat9 is the bleeding edge of cabling. All right, so we're connected. And what I'm going to do on the Mac, though, is run that system report again, because I am curious as to whether or not we have a, let's go to USB. All right, so, oh, that's intriguing, isn't it? So it's recognizing this not as a, it's recognizing it as a 2.5 gig network adapter. So we're not getting the full speed here. And I wonder if maybe it got confused on something here. Let me go and look at my, I'm just checking out one more thing. I'm just curious as to what my network settings show us right now. So yeah, this is weird. So here, check this out. Let me go back to my network setting here. So it's calling itself a 2.5 gig network adapter, even though this one is advertised as 5, and it's negotiated a 5 gigabit connection. Isn't that intriguing? Let's take a look at the hardware. This is so weird. Let's go manual. I'm just curious what, yeah, let's just cancel all this. Let's just see what happens when we run the test. Because it's definitely connecting to the other switch at 5, or to the switch at 5, but what I'm not sure about is what we'll see on the maximum bandwidth, because it's only using the 5 gigabits of, yeah, so This one's running slower. Isn't that crazy? This one's running slower than the 2.5 gig one was running. We're like just over a gigabit. So I wonder if there's a driver I need to get or something. Yeah, I may unplug this and plug it back in again. Could be a bad USB cable too, but that is not what we should be seeing out of this. Because remember, just before, so let me stop this real quick. Remember, the 2.5 gig, that's what we were getting on the 2.5 gig. And this one is like not running at the speed it's supposed to be running at. So I'm going to go and just check and see if we have a driver for it. Because it could be that I need a driver. So let's check that real quick. So let's go to downloads. Let's go on their website here. We'll go to downloads. I just want to turn off my messages here so we don't get interrupted with constant pings of stuff. Okay. And I'll turn off, there we go, perfect, okay. So let's jump back here. And this part number on this one is the SS5G. So let's type in NT-SS, okay, here we go, 5G. And there are some downloads for this one, so let's take a look. Yeah, there is a Mac driver, so that could be what our problem is. So we're going to want to make note of that for people that are, when I do the review, because if you don't install the driver, you may not get what you are expecting. And I'm not even sure what I should do with this. Let's take a look. It's just giving me like this weird zip file here. Let's see. Prepare. Disable system integrity protection. That's always something that gets me a little nervous. Yeah, let's do a reboot first and see if maybe that, because like they want you, oh my goodness, can you imagine? So check this out. Like this is what they want you to do. They want the user to go into this. Yeah, let's try two things here. Why don't we disconnect it first and reconnect it and see if maybe that has an impact. So let's do that. Because I found sometimes like on the second connection on the Mac, it sometimes will work better. So let's do that. And let's see what it is. Because we're back, it's connecting properly at 5 gigs. And okay, Sabrent adapter is connected, and it's still showing up as a 2.5 gig adapter. So let's run the test again and just see what happens. So remember, the adapter is connected at 5 gigs, but we're still only getting super slow speeds. Let's try to reverse the connection. Let's just go server to client. Let's pull data from the iMac, or the Mac Mini. And yeah, same outcome. So something's not right here on the driver side. All right, so next we're going to try a reboot. Yeah, now it's not even starting the test. And I think it's because I maybe started a test too soon after stopping the other one. So let's do a quick restart on the Mac here. And let's see if that gives us a better outcome. Martin Paolini is here. Rob Hanks is here. Rudresh is here. Nick F. is here. So we got lots of folks in here. So we're just waiting for this thing to reboot. And the Mac has rebooted. I'm going to log back into it. And when it comes back, we'll try this again. And what's weird is that it's something related to the driver because the adapter is negotiating its connection properly. So remember, these two lights next to the 3 here indicate that the Mac Mini is connected at 10 gig. And then port 2 here, once the Mac is finished booting, it's going through its boot cycle right now. So there you go. So now you can see that the light to the right of the 2 is off, but the one to the left is on, and that indicates we have a 5 gig connection here. Patrick Chang is asking a production-related question. about what capture card I'm using on my vMix PC. So I went with the Blackmagic, they have a Blackmagic DeckLink Quad. It's 4 HDMI inputs, and I'm using all 4 of them right now. So I've got this one, this one, this one, and this one. Those are my 4 right now that I'm running concurrently here. So let's take a look now and see if the network adapter is showing up as something different. I have a feeling it will not be. Yeah, we're still dealing with the same recognition here. So let's load up Wi-Fi perf and let's connect to the Mac Mini again. And I've got to cycle the test on the Mac Mini because it has stopped working. So give me a second, everybody. Talk amongst yourselves. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the test got a little gummed up on the Mac Mini. And if this continues not to work, what we'll do is we will bring over a Windows PC and try it with a Windows PC. All right, let's load that back up. Okay, so now we're back up. But I still remain concerned that this device is not being detected as a 10 gig device. And you say, well, Lon, it's only 5 gigs. Well, the reason that you want a 10 is because there's overhead on the USB. So you're not going to get the full 5 on a 5 gigabit connection. You need 10 to carry some of that overhead. So that's what you need. All right, so I restarted the test. Let's run it. And it is running, but we're getting the same speeds that we were before. So it's definitely something related to the USB side. So I've got a few things that we can try here. One is I'm going to try a different USB cable. So I'm going to grab this USB-C cable that, oops, wrong camera, that came with the Samsung drive I just looked at. So that could be what's going on. And again, I think it's going to be driver related here. So let's try the cable first. And this is all about troubleshooting, right? We're going to try different things and see what gets us to the outcome we're looking for. And this is important for people that are looking at this device because, you know, if it's not going to deliver the speed, is it worth it? But yeah, I haven't installed the drivers yet because I just want to see what the user experience is going to be. Because here's the thing. From a consumer standpoint these days, people buy these things and they plug them in and they want them to work, right? So your first reaction is plug it in. Does it plug and play? Is it going to work out of the box? Maybe not. I am going to look, though, at the... Let's take a look at the manual real quick, just so we can... So if you have Windows, as you can see, it will download automatically. Yeah, and I think our problem here is definitely driver related. And they've got a whole bunch of instructions for the Windows side of things, but nothing on the Mac. So this might be a little bit more of work here. And you can see this is PC Mac compatible, but the Mac drivers are not easy to install. So I'm going to run the test again with the better USB cable. Let's see if what that does for us here. And the server timed out again. All right, so let's go reboot the test again on the iMac. I'm not sure why it's giving me a hard time now, but that's how it always goes on a live stream. Things don't work correctly. So let's quit this and reload it. And we'll try this again. Okay. Yeah, so I suspect the cable is not going to make any difference, but let's try it anyhow. Let's see what we get. I just don't like the path they want to put us on with the driver, because the driver on the Mac side at least is not something that looks like it's going to be that easy. And it looks like the server now is not responding. All right, so let's this is how it always goes, right? We never have everything work. Zam says it would be awesome if I could test this with a USB Type-C Android phone. Maybe that will work. Yes, I have one upstairs, which I can grab. So we can try that out. Let me do the driver here and see if that fixes anything for us because, you know, if there's a driver, we should install it. Because it's definitely not detecting itself properly here. So let me show you the ridiculous driver instructions, though, here. Like, this is what you got to do. Seriously? Like, is a consumer going to do this? So install copy pacific.kext sudo cp. So it wants me to copy this into the library extension folder. And then you got to load. This is crazy. And you have to disable system integrity protection to get all this working. Part of me is like, is this something I really want to do, like on a Mac? I mean, I'm not digging that. Let me go grab a Windows computer, and I'm going to install the endpoint on it. And we'll do this locally on the desk here. So let's go grab my. Just happens to be on the floor right next to me. So let's put this up here. And just make sure things don't slide off the table, because that's the last thing we want to have happen right now. So what I'm going to do, I'm just trying to think about the process. So I'm going to plug in the Thunderbolt Ethernet to this laptop. And let me zoom the camera out a little bit here so you can see what I'm going to do. Like, we're going into the tech lab territory today. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put the 10 gig back into the Mac, and we're going to plug the 5 gig adapter into the Windows machine just to limit the potential for problem here. But I'm going to say, really, that this is the 5 gig, not for Mac at the moment. I mean, they got to come up with a better driver installation than what they're currently offering, because that is just untenable, in my opinion. Okay, so what I need to get is another patch cable, because we're going to do all this locally on the desk. So let's find another Cat 6 patch cable. Actually, a Cat 7, even better. I think it's a Cat 7. And we're going to take out the 10 gig adapter here and plug it back into the Mac. And I'm hoping that I don't knock anything over here, because that would be really embarrassing. So we're going to plug this in. We're going to plug this in. And let me just move this. Actually, be very expensive and embarrassing if this thing falls off the desk. So let's move it next to each other here. And then we're going to plug this into here. And we'll get back up on a 10 gig connection. So let's let that negotiate itself. And then let's try, we'll kind of run through the Windows installation process here. Yes, it's very much on the edge here. So we will, this is the science projects that we get here on the channel. So they did say that on Windows, this is a plug and play process. So let's put that to the test. And for some reason, my Mac is like totally not digging any kind of network adapter now. Let's plug it into this one here. All right, that's plugged in, that's plugged in. And this is like totally dark. So we're probably going to reboot the Mac again one more time. Oh, there it goes. Now it's up. Okay, so let me just double check and make sure the Mac is working properly. I'll push some data over to the Mac Mini. Make sure that's up and running. All right. Oh, the Mac Mini is like totally done. Okay, so we'll come back to that. All right. So now we are going to plug the network adapter into the Windows machine. Get rid of some of this trash here. And they said in the manual that the Windows process here will be automatic. So let's see what happens. So it says setting up device. Now again, it's detecting this as a 2.5 gig Ethernet device and not, oh wow. Ew, okay. All right, hang on a second. So you know what it just did? When I plugged it in, it mounted a virtual CD-ROM. So it's not automatically downloading anything, but it mounted a virtual CD. This thing feels like, it's like, could we make this thing and get it out to the marketplace? Because it's like put in, like it's not downloading drivers from Microsoft. it is putting itself on the network. However, I bet you, let me see if I have the endpoint on here. I don't think I do. Let me pull up the endpoint. I'm just going to put the endpoint on here real quick. Wi-Fi perf endpoint Windows. So they have a this Wi-Fi perf, even though it's for the Mac only, they have a driver or a endpoint that works with the Mac version, so it's always working properly. But I have to pick out chimneys now. I feel like a science experiment whenever I'm asked to do this kind of stuff. So let's grab the endpoint for Windows. We'll drop it into my downloads folder. This is turning into quite a like I was thinking, can I fill an hour doing this? And I think the answer is going to be yes. Because you saw how easy the 2.5 gig thing was. That was super quick. This one is proving to be a bit more involved. So we're going to have to do a little bit more work here. All right. All right. And actually, what's interesting is that the Windows computer here has not detected an Ethernet connection at all. So I've got to install these drivers, and they did not install automatically. So what I want to do real quick, though, before we do anything else, is I want to plug this back into the Mac, because I'm curious if it's going to, if maybe I missed that virtual CD-ROM. So I'm going to plug it back in and just see if maybe there's some Mac thing that I missed. I'm just going to look on the side here to see if it mounts a drive in addition to getting the network thing going. Yeah, it looks like it's not mounting a virtual disk here, so it's only on the Windows side that it's doing that. None Yet says this is the QNAP 5 gig NIC did the same thing. I'm guessing it probably did because they're probably using the same hardware. None Yet is saying that it will go away once you install the driver. I would imagine it would do that. Yeah, so the Mac is not seeing the CD thing. So I'm going to just call it. Like, if you got a Mac, don't buy this thing, because this is not a good, I mean, seriously, you're going to go in and disable all your security, and I mean, really? Give us a driver package that's properly signed as a developer app and do it the right way. And I'm guessing that Windows is going to be putting us into a similar predicament here as well. Okay. But you know what? I'm doing this for you all. So there you go. So we're going to wait for that virtual CD-ROM to put itself up on screen real quick. And then we'll get going with the driver. So remember I was talking about how great the Realtek chipsets were on the 5 gig side? This is some different chipset. And now I'm waiting for that thing to pop up again. I don't see it yet. And it was just interesting because this was the same as before. It took it a while before it would actually pop up on the screen with that thing. So let's let it do its thing for a second here. Yeah, I still haven't seen it yet. I wonder if I missed my opportunity. So let's go back to the manual while we're waiting and see what a nightmare. So the 2.5 gig, super easy. Plug it in, done, right? So here's what it says on the Windows side. If your Windows system is connected to the internet, which it is, drivers will be installed automatically. On the other hand, if Windows operating system is not connected to the internet, you're likely to see the screen below. We didn't see any of that on here. If that's the case, the Sabrent adapter contains a read-only memory chip that holds a copy of the Windows drivers necessary to install your device. And it kind of goes from there. Why don't we go to Sabrent's website and just download the driver rather than wait for this thing to pop up again? Because I have a feeling that it's never going to pop up now because I kind of like denied it the first time. So let's go to Sabrent's website again. And we'll go to downloads. And I have a feeling that, you know, as far as like simple USB network devices are concerned, I think you're going to probably need to wait a little bit longer for a simple plug and play 5 gig adapter. Oddly, the 10 gig Thunderbolt stuff works just fine. Just plug it in and you're good. But this stuff, forget it. Okay, so we're going to grab the Windows driver now. They do have a Linux driver, by the way, here as well. And let's just download this. Yeah, and that's Nunez says it's an Aquanta chipset, which is exactly what's on this one. And that's the driver we're downloading now. So let's see what the Windows process is like. And I will issue appropriate warnings to folks on the Mac side. And I'm sure they can correct this just by making an installable thing. So now I've downloaded the drivers, and I have exactly what was in that virtual CD-ROM thing before. And you got a little software agreement here, and who knows what's going on with this, right? I mean, you got to take a leap of faith with some of these things. Okay, so that's installed. So now we may have to reboot. I don't know. So I'm waiting to see if my Ethernet takes over here, because it's recognizing that there's an unidentified network, but it should be getting an IP address. So let's do a quick reboot of the Windows machine and see if that gives us a better outcome here. And Zam says, I bet Sabrent didn't want to follow Apple's driver rules. I would imagine that's the case. And I think with all these companies, they have engineering resources but I think a lot of them rely on the factories to make the stuff and they package it, right? So, because they make so much stuff. And you look at them and Pluggable, and they're all good companies. I'm not trashing the company by any means, but that's the nature of the commodity business, is that you can't make everything. So you contract and have things made for you, and you get whatever those manufacturers want you to use. All right, so we're back to my Windows desktop here. And my Windows Defender is telling me all is good. And I'm still on Wi-Fi, but let's give it a second. Let's see if it... Yeah, it's still working on the network here. And normally I would plug in my thing for you, but let me just disable the Wi-Fi here for a second, and let's see if it's able to get itself on the network. Because we know this setup is working because the Mac is on the network with Thunderbolt. So, and the 2.5 gig adapter worked also. Okay, it looks like, so it's connected, but it's not getting an IP address. So we're striking out on this thing. So let me unplug it and plug it back in again. Because the drivers are installed now, so we should not have any problems here trying to connect. Okay, so Ethernet 4 is what it's calling this. And it's got the driver here. It's like it's the Aquantia Corporation, all that stuff. But it is not getting on the network. Now, it could be that it doesn't like the switch, which I've seen that happen before also. So why don't we take this cable out of the mix, and we're going to plug in directly from my LAN connection right into the... This is only a gigabit now, so what we're trying to figure out here is if it doesn't like the network switch. Because if I plug in directly, conceivably, it should get us on the network. So let me load up my browser, and I have the Wi-Fi is off. So if I go to my YouTube channel, okay, so Wi-Fi is off, and we're connecting through the Ethernet. So that works. So the next question is, let's plug this back in. Can we get this to work on this switch so we can actually do our test here? Okay, it looks like it's working now. So I think the problem is my Ethernet cable is bad, like the connector is bad. So I think I was partially pushed out, but that's not why this wasn't working. It wasn't working because the network adapter was not being detected properly on the Mac. However, I am going to come back and revisit that in a second. Okay, so we are all connected here. I'm going to connect up the endpoint, and we're going to run a test from the Mac to the Windows PC here and see what we get. So let's go to endpoint. And this is going to give us, there we go, perfect. Okay, so now we're going to go over to my Mac here, and I'm going to just change the IP address. And we're going to go to 139. And let's run the test. Okay, so now I'm seeing communication between the two parts there. And what's our speed? Yeah. So we are doing better than 2.5 gig, but not as good as we should be. And the reason is that we're not getting the full USB Gen 2 speed out of this device, because I suspect that this is only a Gen 1 connection. And this is about, like with the overhead and everything, the best we're going to get, even though we should be getting almost a gigabit more out of this than we're getting right now. It should be about 4,500, not 3,500. And I think the reason is that that USB connection, given its nature, is being saturated at the moment, because it is only a first-gen device. But let's move it to the other direction. Let's just see if it's something related to configuration. Yeah, and that's actually pulling it from the server from this end back. It's only it's like 2.5 gig. So, and this is partly due to the Mac and how it configures itself with data. Like the problem with this faster Ethernet is that the configuration is a mess. But we should, like I said, we should be getting about 4,500 here, which we're not getting. And none yet is confirming that he's getting the same speeds on his. So my gut here is a combination of young drivers, in other words, drivers that are not yet optimized, combined with only being a USB Gen 1 connection leading to this outcome. That's what I think is going on. I'm just going to record a little B-roll here. So I'm just going to let this run. Because I was expecting a little bit more out of this adapter, everybody. I was, I mean, given how nice the 2.5 gig works, it's just super smooth on the 2.5 gig side, but not here with this one. And the Mac driver thing, I mean, they shouldn't even call this Mac compatible. This is just not Mac compatible. So, yeah, all right. That's good. Let me just log this clip here real quick. And let's see. It's interesting with my new production computer here. I've got 4 HDMI inputs coming in, all at 30 frames per second, 1080p. So those 4, and my total, I'm using only 5% of my production computer's capabilities. So if I just had a faster upload speed, I could easily be doing 4K for everything right now, because my cameras can do 4K, but my inputs on here can do I can do four 60 hertz 4K inputs into this thing. Isn't that crazy? It's like 5%, and I'm streaming, and I'm recording, right? So I could do all of this on this computer. It's pretty crazy. All right, so this is going to be 5 gig speed. Okay. This may actually just end up being on the extras channel, because there's not a lot to do here, other than to kind of give people a bit of a warning that this is not the adapter you're looking for. And what's crazy though is that, so look at the price differences here. So the 5 gig here is 60 bucks, and it's really only a 3.5 gig. But the Thunderbolt for 10 gig is 150. So you're paying an extra $100 almost to get the and partly it's the Thunderbolt licensing and everything else, but it's yeah, I was expecting a little bit more out of this. So yeah, we're not doing too good here. So Zam says only the 2.5 gig is worth it. Yeah, I think at this point I am not comfortable recommending the 5 gig adapter, because you're really not getting the 5 gig speed. You are getting a gigabit more than the 2.5, so that's good. But I'm just not seeing speeds that would make it, worth an extra 20 bucks, and it's problematic with the drivers. So you've got, this one's got the Realtek driver, which is in just about every major operating system, so you plug it in, it works. This one does not seem to be working as well. So let me try one thing now, because we have some added knowledge as to what one of our issues was. So I'm going to plug it back into the Mac, because I think the issues that I had a few minutes ago with the Mac were related to the loose cable that was not in there all the way. That's my fault. But it doesn't make up for the other issues that we've got here. So let's go and, again, just without the drivers, let's just see what we get here when we run it back to the Mac Mini, because this should work now. And yeah, so it's still, without the drivers, you're less than the 2.5 gig. And I don't think, who's going to go through that process of installing those drivers on the Mac? And let's just flip the direction real quick and just make sure that it's not, it'll probably get even less now. It'd be like regular gigabit. Let's see. Yeah, same. So yeah, you got to get those drivers installed. So there you go. Paolo says, dude, you need a 10 gig switch. Dude, got one right here. Trust me, it works. We just tested it. And then, yeah, we guess we could run a crystal disk mark test or something, but yeah, you're not going to get, what I like about doing the iPerf test is that this is like just kind of what's your pure bandwidth you can push down there. And what I love about it is that it's very consistent and it can saturate the connection quite effectively. So I just love just the simplicity of a Wi-Fi perf test. And granted, your real world would be a little different based on overhead on the operating system and the load on the device you're connecting to on a disk, for example. Let me just plug the 10 gig back in. Let's wait for that to spin up here. And we'll just make sure that my connection is still sound. So, again, if you got the 10 gig Thunderbolt installed, what you'll see is that. So really what we should be seeing is not 3,500 out of the 5 gig. We should be seeing not 9,400 like we're getting here, but we should be getting probably in the upper, low to mid 4s, which we were not getting. So I think that's on that front there. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. So we'll have to play around. I'm going to play around a little bit with this, and then I'll do the review. But I think this will probably be an extras channel thing. The 2.5 gig works fine. I can recommend the 2.5 gig. It's actually nicely constructed. It's a pretty nice little adapter. So the 2.5 gig is good. Works as advertised, partly because it's got, the standard chipset that everybody uses. So that's been good. 5 gig, not good, in my opinion. So, yep, that's that. Zam wants to know any update on my internet upgrade. No, in fact, Comcast has been ignoring my email for the last month. So I don't know if they are trying to make it work and just, like they could tell me, like I said to them, finally I wrote to the other person there. I said, look, if it's not going to happen, just tell me. It's okay. I'll be upset that, you told me one thing and did another, but I could take bad news, but yeah, I don't have any update on what's going to happen. So then I contacted my other person, and they said, yeah, someone's supposed to get in touch with you, and no one ever did. And that was a month ago that they were supposed to, actually more than a month ago, it was May. And I've been emailing the guy, like I have it in my little trigger thing that I get reminded about, like every week to email the guy, and haven't heard. So I don't know what the scope of that project is going to be. And honestly, if I can't get the speed here, then I'm probably going to go and get an office downtown where I know I can get a fiber connection. And it wouldn't I could actually have a choice in the spot where I'm looking, because it's kind of an entry point. So I will look at that. But yeah, hot sauce. It is frustrating to be left hanging because I'm trying to plan, what to do with myself. So the good news is I have options, but I'd prefer. I'm perfectly happy working out of my house, but if I have to move to someplace a little bit further down the road, I'm willing to do it, and I can afford to do it. But it's just I just would rather not. So yeah, another super chat. Thank you very much. How about the website or setting up on Floatplane? The website I got to get back on. So hopefully I will get that figured out shortly. And the Floatplane, I did talk to Floatplane. I had a call with them, and I like the platform. The problem for me is labor cost and back to the bandwidth problem and getting everything uploaded over there. So it's I just don't know like if it would make sense financially at this point in time, because there's a lot of work that has to get done to backload the catalog over there, and the revenue comes only from people watching. And my understanding on Floatplane is that you can only watch the people that you're paying to watch. So it just creates another area for me to manage. So I just don't know if it's going to work for me. But we'll see. If I had faster bandwidth, it would be a lot easier because we could upload there in a minute or two versus the half hour it takes for every platform right now. So that's that's the plan there. Midwest Washington shooter. I found my development is a contractual blackout keeping the local fiber. Yeah, that's the other thing. These local blackouts, all this bad stuff. Can't get anything going. Zam says he currently pays for many creators on Floatplane. So I'm just curious how it works. So you can only see who you pay for, right? Is that how that works there? So I'll look into it. Again, it's just a matter of, like right now my primary revenue sources are YouTube ad revenue and the affiliate stuff that I do. And so I'm not against finding more revenue streams, but it may cost me more to be on Floatplane than I might get from it. So that's part of the conundrum. And the reason why it costs me more to be there is that I have to pay somebody to upload the video, or I have to do it myself. And if we have to go back, through the back catalog, it'll take a while. Like I would totally upload the Floatplane if I could, because I'm actually okay providing my content for free, because my content's always going to be free. So if people want to pay to be a member like they do now on the channel or through the super chat, which I'm very appreciative of, Sam, happy to do that. I've never really, I don't think my content's valuable enough, and maybe it's just my self-esteem talking, but I don't think my content is valuable enough to put behind a paywall. And I actually do better with it being a commodity type of content versus making it more premium. So, if I could run everything for free on Floatplane, and if people wanted to pay, fine, I'd be open to that. Maybe I'll reach out to them about that to see if that's an option. Cajoling Technology says, have I seen the AWS Snowball and Snow Cone? Box gets shipped to you, you fill it up with footage. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I have not heard of the AWS Snowball. I know that they've done things where you can send, where you could send a hard drive in, but I haven't seen this. Oh, maybe I have seen this. Let's take a look. I'll pull it up on screen for you all to see what I'm looking at here. So it looks like it's an implementation guide here. Oh, I see. Yeah, I think I have seen this before. So you can load in, right, it's actual sneaker net. You load it up on a disk and mail it in. It's a backup solution, Mike says. Yeah, actually, so what I do for backup is I have a Synology NAS. By the way, my one from 6 years ago died. And I was expecting that to happen because of the issues they've had with the Intel chips. So I've got a new one now that I'm running with it. And it was actually a really interesting experience. I should do a video about it, actually, because I was doing hyper backup. And I did hyper backup to I had like a 12 terabyte external drive hooked up to it. So I was doing hyper backup to that. And then I also hyper backup to Amazon S3 for certain super critical files were going up to S3. And then my YouTube channel was also going to the external hard drive, but I backed the YouTube channel up to Glacier because that's super cheap. So I've got a terabyte up on Glacier of all the prior YouTube videos that I've published. And that, I think I'm paying very little for that. So every day or two, it will, sweep out whatever's in the YouTube folder and push it up to Glacier. So, and Mike Jorgensen says that's the snowball is a way of seeding it right, so you don't have to upload as much. And FT of the X was wondering which Synology died. So I had a, what was the model number? It was actually 6 years old, and it wasn't the hard drives that went. I think it fell victim to that Intel chip problem, which I think is correctable. And actually what was happening was I had been meaning to upgrade to the newer one. So a while ago, we got in that big fireproof thing from IOSafe. And if you haven't seen it, maybe I'll go and take a quick image of it for you so you can see what it looks like. My office is a total disaster right now, so I'm embarrassed to do this right this second. Let me pull up my camera app here. And what I will do is I'm going to get my input ready, and I'll show you what this thing looks like, because it's a monster. The problem is the fan noise on it is ridiculous. Super ridiculous, actually. All right, there we go. So here, bear with me for a second. I'm going to go show you what I have running now in the back room. And I've got to get now more cabling run. This is I'm trying to figure out what to do with my office location. So let me switch over. Hopefully you can all see this. So this is the IOSafe. Isn't that a monster? And this is a 1019 from Synology. They sent this to me a while back, and I've been meaning to put stuff into it. This thing is fireproof. I did a review of it. It is fireproof and waterproof, and it can sit in a fire for 10 minutes. And I have it all buttoned up right now, but they have a material that has water built into it. So when it burns, it uses that material to burn off the heat, because it converts the material to steam. So it can sit in a fire for about a half an hour, and it can sit underwater for a week and a half or something. So you lose all the electronics, but the drives are encased inside of it. And go on my channel and do a search for it. I've reviewed 2 of these. And this is the regular 1019 Plus, but it's got the rest of it in there. But this thing's a monster. And the fans, though, listen to the fan. You probably can't hear the fan noise, but the fans are super noisy on it. So I got to keep it in this back room here so the mics don't pick it up. And then I'm backing up to this WD black drive every night. And the whole thing gets dumped onto that drive. And that's how I restored. So the restoration was really, it was honestly, I was surprised by how quick it was. And I've been meaning to do the upgrade because I wanted something more powerful. But I also wanted to go to the BT RFS file system. So that was a good opportunity to set up a new Synology drive. And Hyper Backup brought me exactly back where it was amazing. It took about a day to get everything back up and running, but it was super quick. I was really surprised by how well it worked. The one thing that took a long time, I have a MySQL server for a few consulting projects that I do, and that was a big database. So that took 3 days to restore. But after that, it was fine. So it was good. DC147 is here. And I think somebody was telling me they got some good hot sauces the other day. Was that hot sauce or Lon Dog? One of the two. It's funny, Lon Dog talks, I think, more about the hot sauces than the hot sauce in video games person does. Let's see. So Lon Dog said, so installing old drives from the failed Synology into the new Synology. Okay, so, and actually, so what I did not do, so I thought about doing that. So yes, you could take the old drives out of the prior Synology and put them into the new one. That would work fine. But I opted not to do that because I wanted to update the file system. So my old one was on the prior pre-BTRFS file system, and I wanted BTRFS on the new one because I could do the snapshot replication stuff. The other thing that I wanted to do was go from a 4-drive RAID to a 5-drive RAID so I could have 2 drive failures. And so my other RAID was RAID, gosh, I'm trying to remember what RAID I had. It was RAID, I forgot which RAID I'm on, but that one was RAID 5. And then I wanted to have the 2-drive failure, which I think is RAID 6, if I'm not mistaken. So I could lose 2 drives, and you give up some storage space, but I could lose 2 drives. And in order to do that, you got to start with a new volume. So I created the new volume, and then I restored from hyper backup onto the new volume. So I basically got the best of both worlds because I had the hyper backup running every night, so I didn't lose anything. And then, once I got that drive configured, I just popped the hard drive in, hit the button, and then came back a day later, and everything was back. It was great. It was really good. So, yeah. So, yeah, I think it was SHR1. And I went to SHR2, which is what I think I did on that. So that was kind of the workflow there. But yeah, it worked out great. And that thing's great in the back. I just got it. So the problem though is that I don't have an Ethernet drop in there, and I should have put one there because on the other side of the wall to where we just were, there's a drop of 4. So I'm going to have an electrician come back in and get me rewired. So. Yeah, so right. So Mike Jorgensen says regular SHR on Synology is RAID 5, and SHR2 is similar to RAID 6. That's correct. I think that's how it works. And not to go off topic here, but they have a great Synology. They have a great Synology RAID calculator. Let me pull it up here real quick. So if you're trying to and this actually is more than just good for Synology, because if you've got I'll pull this up here. So if you've got any kind of RAID, you can go in here and say, all right, I've got let's say 4 terabyte drives, and you can just drop them into this little calculator thing. And then you could look at what the space would look like on SHR2 versus SHR. So I don't know what I've got in that thing right at the moment, but if I were to replicate a 5-drive configuration, you could see if I was RAID 5, which is exactly the same as SHR, and RAID 6, which is the same as SHR2, you can see what you get. So actually, yeah, I've got 5 4-terabyte drives in that system right now. So you can see that I'm getting 4 terabytes less space, but I can lose 2 drives and not lose any data. So in the regular SHR, this is what the advantage of having a 5-bay NAS is about, because if in a 4-bay NAS you lose one of the drives and you're not in SHR2, you can't lose another one. And that is critical for when, let's say you lose a drive and now you're in data recovery mode with the new drive that you just put in. So if that new drive doesn't get everything before another one fails, you lost everything again. So what's nice about the 2-drive failure mode here is that I can lose a drive, and then I can lose another one and still have my RAID together. And that's why the 5-bay RAIDs are often what I suggest for the minimum now, because they're not that much more expensive. But you do lose a little space, as you can see, because you basically have 2 drives that are used for data protection, which means that if you have 5 4-terabyte drives and you can lose 2 drives, then you need to dedicate 8 terabytes to data protection, right? So that's your trade-off. So it's really, this is so helpful. And then what's cool about this is that you could experiment with things also. So let's say next year, and I'm never going to fill this up. And I say that like, oh, you could say you never fill a gig. I'm never going to fill this up. But let's say I did fill it up and I wanted to buy another hard drive. So let's see what happens if I dropped an 8-terabyte drive. So let's say we pull out, so let's say we pulled out one of the 4 terabytes. I could put an 8-terabyte in here, and it doesn't make any bit of difference on my available storage on a SHR2 because you have to account for data protection. So we're pretty much, with just dropping in one 8-terabyte drive, we are pretty much at the same storage level because we can't use 4 terabytes and maintain 2-drive protection. So if I pop out another one here and put in a second 8-terabyte, I think we might see, there it goes. Okay, so yeah, so we're still not there because we are, you know what I mean? Like, you got to really play around with this until you can get to a point where you can start picking up some space. So in order to gain space, let's get this thing to work. Oops, shoot. So let's go to 8 terabyte and another 8 terabyte. Why isn't this working all of a sudden? There we go. So in order to pick up space, I can't just drop in 3 8-terabyte drives. You got to keep going. You almost have to replace the whole thing to be able to realize the additional space. So there you go. So you know what I mean? So this is what's so handy about this calculator, is that you can really get a feel for, you know, what the impact is of adding drives. And you can also see it gets more complicated when you add more protection. So if you know, let's put the 4 terabyte configuration back in here again. So I've got, you know, 16 terabytes here. On a single drive protection, I could load in another 8 terabytes and then do another one. So let's pop that one out and then put another 8 terabyte in here. So if I pull out 2 4 terabyte drives, I'm going to pick up a little bit, maybe not. I can't remember what I had there before. I think I do pick up a little bit. Yeah, so I did pick up a little bit with just 2, but I can't pick up that same amount on the other configuration. So that's the kind of thing that you got to play around with here. This is really useful for that. So and actually in one of the Synology setup videos that I did, I spent a lot of time on this calculator because people will say, hey, I bought a new hard drive and I put it in, but I'm not seeing any benefit. And that's because the math doesn't work out. You got to get the math to work. Oh, and Mike says you can click on the drives and they just pop in. That might be easier. So, you know, so you got to figure out how much. I would suggest that you start with the amount of space that you want to start with, that, you know, that gives you some room for the future. So like if I put in a bunch of 10 terabyte drives here, so here's like 5 of these. And then if I put in a 12 and take this one out, you know, you can just kind of mess around with it until you get to where you want to go. But, you know, my advice is that you want to have as much data protection as possible. So good backups, off-site backup to the cloud if you can. And I do mine in the middle of the night, so as slow as my upload speeds are, it's happening when I'm sleeping, so who cares, right? So good backup at home. I would, if you can, rotate the backups out every once in a while and put one of those physical backups off-site. I'm not doing that. I should be. So that's important, just on the local side. Cloud backup if you can do it. And then having as much redundancy on the RAID as you can. All those things make a big difference. So that's it. Nick, I did get your email about the modulator thing. I'll take a look at it. I'm not sure it's something that I'm going to be able to cover unless it can have a real consumer usage there, but it sounds like it should work. I can't see why it wouldn't, especially if you can modulate the video to be detected over the thing. I think the big issue on the HD home run antenna devices is having it recognize the channel and how you would handle that. And maybe I may forward that over to the guys at HD Home Run and see what they think about it, because it might be there could be some usefulness in there for people, especially if they want to do closed circuit TV broadcasts and stuff. Londog asks, is there any advantages to mixing hard drives with SSDs during an upgrade? I think there's no disadvantage to it beyond the fact that, you know, the SSDs are not designed to be written to as much. The other issue is that you really won't gain the benefit of the SSD until every drive in your system is an SSD, because I think you're always going to be dealing with the slowest drive. What the Synologies do is they have a SSD cache that you can add to the drive. So the 1019 Plus on that IO safe out there, in fact, I just ordered 2 drives for it today. You can put in 2 SSDs to use as cache. So a lot of the frequent files that you're accessing a lot will be sent to you over the SSD. So it cuts down on a lot of the latency. And then you can also write to it faster because it'll put stuff into the cache and then write out to disk in the background. So I think that's the better bet, is to set up an SSD cache on those things. Recipe Bob, thank you very much for your Super Chat contribution towards the Comcast fiber. Hopefully it happens. We'll see. So we'll keep an eye on that. A couple people are talking about YouTube taking down channels without warning. I've been seeing a few people have that happen to them. A lot of times I'm finding that there's a reason that it happened. So, you know, like there's always a more to the story kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it happens. I think sometimes, you know, they have a lot of volume and there's people that make mistakes So I think it does happen. Eric Bazinga is here. I did get your email about the Star Trek thing. We just have to plan out a time for that. So we're gonna make it happen at some point. Mark wants me to check out Tableau for OTA. So here's the problem with the OTA stuff that I review is that I have a hard time getting things over the air where I live. So I haven't looked at a lot of OTA products. So I'm hoping that the move to the new broadcast standard here in the US might give me a better chance of getting stuff, but we'll have to see. Hot Sauce is prepping his GameCube to install the GC loader. All right, doing some homebrew on that sucker. Should be pretty cool. All right, well, I have to run, everybody, now that we have 419 people watching. It always happens like this because I've got to get on a phone call. And then after that call, I got another call. And then I think I have something else after that. It's like one of those days that doesn't end. So yeah, we will be reconvening soon. I should probably do a live stream on just Synology stuff because I think that would be of interest to people. And it looks like Greg says Jordan Pierre's channel was taken down because he repairs vintage audio equipment. Yeah, that's usually what happens, Greg, is that the channel gets taken down through some automation or some misconstrued thing. You got to be careful too, because a lot of people were doing giveaways, and they were having, so like there was one channel that I was watching, he got hit because of a giveaway that he did, and I know exactly what happened in his case is that he was giving away stuff, and the third-party giveaway app he was using allowed people to, or he required, I don't know if he required or he allowed, but it was offering the opportunity to subscribe to the channel when they entered the contest. And even if he didn't explicitly say subscribe to enter, YouTube has a policy about artificially racking up your subscriber count. So I'm not supposed to incentivize you to subscribe to me as I understand the rules. And I certainly can't require a giveaway. So I know for a fact, a big no-no is requiring a subscription for a giveaway contest. And so if they see that, that's like an immediate thing because it screws around with the algorithm. And that's like the biggest thing you can't do on YouTube is mess with the algorithm. So hey, let me just say goodbye to the Amazon folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again with more Amazon stuff shortly. I've got a printer and some a new keyboard to test out. Got a bunch of stuff we're going to do in the future. So stay tuned. Follow me on Amazon if you want, because I will do more stuff very shortly. Bye, everybody. All right, we're going to stay on YouTube for another minute or two here until I have to jump off for my call. Yeah, so I got another 5 minutes here. I can answer some questions. So, so John Moshe said HD Home Run had some issue with their ATSC. I didn't see that. Is that on the Kickstarter page? I didn't see what happened with that. But I did do, we did do that video with them to kind of show it working, which was good. Let me pull it up and see if they have an update on that. And right now, it's just hard, with the COVID stuff to get things out of China right now too. I'm sure they're doing that. Yeah, it looks like they did post something about some issues they've run into. It looks like they're pushing back to August. It looks like, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what. Kickstarter is always fraught with issues too. But here's the thing: like it's one thing if the company's good, and they are good over there at Silicon Dust. They know what they're doing. So it looks like they had. Let's take a look. Oh, I see. So some people are getting. So the people that were getting something in July now are going to get them in August. And then August will be later than, later in the month of August. So it's not a terrible delay, it looks like. It looks like a little bit of a delay. Las Vegas, Nashville, Pittsburgh, and Salt Lake City, though, I'll pull up the thing here, are now running test broadcasts. So it looks like we're starting to see more of a footprint happening. So in addition to Phoenix, where they're located now. So we'll have to see what goes on there. So Eric Bazinga says, I don't usually get into politics, and this is what's funny about this comment. What are my thoughts on the rumors that Disney's going to make Star Wars 7 through 9 non-canon? I don't know. I haven't heard much about that. I can't see them not doing that. My guess is that Disney is going to just forget that it ever happened. Look, they pocketed like $3 or $4 billion on those movies, so they did okay on it. But I think the issue, so here's my thing, and I'm going to be, and I got to go in a minute, but my issue with Star Wars, I actually loved The Force Awakens when it came out because I thought it hit the right balance, and I wasn't expecting anything spectacular, you know, and it was good. I really enjoyed that movie. And you can all unsubscribe right now, but I liked The Last Jedi. I thought The Last Jedi was great. I liked the fact that it was different, it was unpredictable. I think the challenge that Rian Johnson had was that they totally screwed up how they would handle the legacy characters. And I think the way they should have done it, and I said this before, is they should have done Star Wars like they did the Picard show. They should have put one of the legacy characters as the lead and all these new people as supporting characters, and they could have built a whole second trilogy off of them. But they didn't do that. And so then they made the other mistake of having all these different writers and directors doing stuff, and they fired people, so there was no consistency to the story from the beginning. So there was nobody in charge of that storyline, and I felt like by the time we got to the last movie, I enjoyed it at the time. I thought it was entertaining, but I was like, this is just a mess, because it felt like they just tried to make everybody happy, and as you know, when you try to make everybody happy, you make nobody happy. So what they should have done, in my opinion, is either JJ should have had the whole thing, or Rian Johnson should have had the whole thing and let it be what it was. And they should have made Luke, Mark Hamill should have been the lead, or maybe him and Carrie Fisher together be the lead. These other supporting characters, these other main characters in the films should have been supporting characters, and they should have developed those characters in that trilogy, closed out the Luke, Leia, and Han story, and then started something new with the rest of them. Now, like, what are they going to do? They're going to put the new people into a movie? No one's going to want to watch that. So, but here's what's interesting, though, from the fan standpoint and money. I did a video on this a while back. If you look at so remember, they were doing a movie a year for a while. And you look at Rogue One, which I think the fans, not every fan, of course, because you can't please everybody, but a majority of the fans really enjoyed Rogue One. They thought it was great. So you didn't have the consternation with Rogue One that you did with The Last Jedi, for example. The Last Jedi, even though the fans hated it, or at least a loud number of them hated it, it did better than Rogue One did the year before. And not by a little bit, but like $500 million better. So I think there's, I think they looked at the business case here, and it doesn't matter what they do. If they just market it, people will go to see the movie, because most people are not at the level of fandom there. So I think that's what they ended up doing. So I think if they were, what they should have done is they should have taken a greater risk, and they should have given the whole thing to Rian Johnson. And you probably hate me for saying that, because you think he probably ruined Star Wars, whatever. But he was given an impossible task of having to make the middle part of the trilogy where something actually has to happen that's different than what you've seen before. He had to somehow work in all these new characters and the legacy characters and try to make it all work. It's an impossible task. And I think they set him up for failure. So his movie could have been better had he had control of the whole story, number one. Number two, they totally, just making the legacy characters supporting characters was a mistake. And the third thing that really put the nail in the coffin for me was the fact that there was no consistency or vision for the story. So you had this just mess that the third movie was. Could have been so much better. So what's going to be good, though, is I think where they're seeing a better financial and fan accepted thing is like The Mandalorian and Disney Plus. And I think that's where Star Wars is going to live. It's going to live in these shows that fans love. Fans love the cartoon shows. Like the other one, the recent one they did with the Star Wars Resistance wasn't so great, but the Rebels was good. The Clone Wars, everybody loves that. In fact, the Clone Wars cartoon show made everybody like the movies better, right? Because remember, the fans hated the other movies too. So that worked out okay. And I'm not even that, I'm a big Star Wars fan, but I'm not like making a YouTube channel about it, right? So Eric says he'd be open to a new trilogy that takes place after the 4 to 6 and before the 7 to 9. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to see, is they're going to be living in that space. And you're starting to see that. Like The Mandalorian lives there. That felt like a true, you know, nice little quasi-sequel to Return of the Jedi, because it takes place after that. The new Star Wars video games are taking place in that time span. So Battlefront's single-player thing was in that area. The new Space Fighter game, which I'm so excited about, that's going to be there too. But I got to say, I really love what they did with Picard. I thought that was really well done. You may not like the show, but I think it was exactly what Star Wars should have been. They took, you know, like the Jean-Luc Picard, you know, is different because he's not the captain and he feels like he's worthless, right? And that's why he was a weaker character initially in that show. And I think they did a great job with that. So we'll have to see. All right, everybody. I am going to, and here's the thing, like, I could never make a movie. I couldn't write that story. So sometimes I feel bad, like, being so critical, because like I know what it's like to get pooped on doing what I do by people that never make videos, right? So who am I to say that they should have done it this way? But I think of it from the standpoint of management, right? It's like, I don't care what story you make, but you know, like, you didn't manage the project properly. And that was my gripe with the whole thing. It started off super strong. And in the back of my mind, I said, you know, like, I don't like this idea of like there being a different writer-director, like who's carrying things over, right? So here's what you should look at, though. If you have Disney Plus, they're doing these, like, you know, you gotta love Disney because they're so good at like squeezing every ounce of value out of things. So they have a series of roundtable discussions about the production of The Mandalorian episode by episode. And in one of those, Dave Filoni, who's like the George Lucas whisperer, he does all the cartoon shows and everything. He actually understands what George Lucas wanted to do, both in the original, in the new trilogy, and what he did in the originals. And he has this great monologue about the Phantom Menace, and it makes you look at the movie in a whole different way, about the fact that the final scene with the lightsaber, it was so, you know, I think it was one of those things that George Lucas understood it, but he didn't properly communicate it to the audience. And Dave Filoni so masterfully communicates what the last scene of that movie was about, because Qui-Gon was the father figure to Anakin. And he said in Qui-Gon's defeat, Anakin was now tied to the Emperor, because that was going to be the father. Like, think about it. If Qui-Gon was there with Anakin throughout that trilogy, he probably wouldn't have gone to the Emperor, right? He needed that father in his life, right? Great. Just watch it. It's great stuff. All right. So I'm going to run here. John Mochi loves the end of my live streams. He's always like talking. Yeah, we should do something where we can bring in people and just have a conversation about this stuff. It'd be kind of fun to do that. All right. I'm going to head out here and get on my next call, and I will catch you all later. Thank you for tuning in, and I am glad you all enjoyed me tinkering around with stuff, and I got to figure out what I'm going to do with this stuff here. So this is a big disappointment on that network adapter, so we'll figure it out. All right, everybody, I will see you soon. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.